I believe that Albion Online is taking a significant step in the wrong direction in regards to its balancing, and here are 4 reasons why I believe so and what kind of impacts I believe this change will have. Before we get into them, to make sure we're all on the same page, if you haven't heard yet, the next balance patch currently in testing features the following change. It says that equipping food and potions now puts all spells on a 10-second cooldown. So essentially it acts the same as changing parts of your equipped loadout. Note that this is taking us back to a system very similar to what it was like before. I think about a year ago when it was changed, it used to be exactly like that, except it was even longer. It was 15-second cooldown for changing anything. And so this change alone is not completely ruin PvP, of course not. We've kind of experienced the effects of this system already. But I believe that it does have a very profound impact on PvP, and specifically the smaller your group size, the bigger this impact will be. And if you're going into solo content, you will feel it the most clearly. So here are 4 things that I believe this change will create, and I do not like any of those 4. Number 1, this is going to once again slow down both mists as well as open world PvP situations, especially for solo players and duos, where every single tactical as well as mechanical decision really matters, and some fights become good or bad or even almost unmanageable if you don't have the correct potion for the situation. You might want to take the fight that is presented, maybe you see a chance to attack someone or you are being attacked, but if you don't have the liberty to select the potion for the situation, you kind of need to, retreat, change your loadout essentially, and then come back into the fight. So if there is going to be a PvP situation, it's going to come about much slower than it is right now. Let's say you brought a Gig Potion because you want your build to be able to fight Fists of Avalon or Curse Staffs, against whom Gigpot is really good. You brought it with you into the mists, and now you see a same IP Curse Staff and you want to take the fight, and he wants to take the fight. Instead of just letting the fight happen, it means that you now both need to take 10 seconds, at least, to first of all run away, to be in a safe place, and then 10 seconds to change. But okay, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but I don't like that the game becomes slower. Reason or implication number 2 is that this change makes IP advantages essentially bigger or a little bit more exploitable, and this is primarily because of Invis potions. Now, it's always risky to participate in PvP or to contest objectives, because you don't know when that 8.3 or any higher IP player is going to roll up and kind of catch you with your pants down. And even if you are going, let's say, in a 6.3 and you actually want to fight that guy, you still want to have the chance to reset and be ready to set up for a proper fight. Invis potion and being able to always have it and equip it at the time of need is the biggest deal for most of us to actually take those PvP situations, contest those objectives, knowing that I have that extra option, or I have that kind of not exactly get out of jail free card, but you understand, sort of that extra thing that if something goes really wrong, maybe I will still be able to get away and potentially reset or stop the fight completely. So no longer allowing you to instantly equip and use your Invis potion makes participating in any sort of PvP or any sort of objectives in the mists or the open world as a solo as well as a duo, it just makes it riskier because you don't have that get out of the situation 3 card ready. This means that the playstyle of avoiding fights and looking for ganking opportunities is also going to be more profitable. Not by too much, but there is still a significant impact of knowing that if you see 2 people fighting, you don't have to worry that one of them or the guy you're going after is going to drink an Invis pot all of a sudden. Implication number 3. If you're no longer able to equip Invis potion on the fly, like we just talked about, this means that a lot more people in the mists will have Invis pots pre-equipped. This was the case earlier, and this is still the case. I still see a lot of newish players come into the mists with an Invis pot or sometimes even 5 Invis pots already equipped, which is a clear signal that they're not trying to take a fight. And that's kind of fine, but if we go through with this change and roll back to the system to what it was before, it will mean that even more people will just have Invis pots ready, which, guess what, means that even fewer people will be willing and ready to take fights. While we can all have different opinions on how difficult fights should be in Albion Online, I think that we can pretty much all agree that encouraging any sort of PvP is one of the main goals that the mechanics and the systems of the game need to achieve. And I would much rather have a game that encourages more people to take risks because they are not locked into a big disadvantage from the get-go, which is what will happen to everybody who is afraid of losing their gear and because of that equips Invis Potion, and then they see an enemy with the exact same build, who are exact same tier, they want to fight, they want to get better, they want to get that lesson, but then they decide not to because the enemy can use a healing potion and they cannot. And finally, implication number 4 is that this change will generally lower the tactical skill gap of PvP fights. Now this is one that I think is the most controversial because I understand that not every skill gap is inherently good, you know? Having to enter a 7-digit code into your computer every time you want to use your E is absolutely useless way to add more skill into the game. But choosing or having to choose the correct potion for every situation, for me has become an awesome part of the game ever since this change was implemented, mostly because this skill gap is less mechanical. Unless you're playing on mobile, I understand the suffering there. And it is more in terms of the strategy of the fight. You can outplay an opponent by understanding the fight better and choosing the correct potion. And this in turn also means that since you have this extra way to outplay different situations, every build becomes more viable. Like the example I brought before, some builds that have no good defensives against curse staffs can now take fights against curse staffs because they can use a potion for that. So giving players the option to choose a potion in the middle of a fight or after they've already seen an enemy is a great way to encourage this tactical skill gap. And then, you know, if the fight changes, or let's say this curse staff attacks later, for example, you want to change to gig, or if you get into a fight and you realize you don't need the gig pot, but now you have a problem that the enemy is running away, being able to throw a poison is all part of this skill gap I'm talking about. So, okay, enough bitching. You know that this channel is not really about talking about problems usually and more about getting better and enjoying PvP. So what could be the actual solution? First of all, let's all recognize, I already mentioned this just a second ago, let's recognize that mobile players are a little bit screwed with the current system in that it's much more difficult for them to use the current mechanics of the game. And so leaving it like this forever is probably not a good not a good choice either. But being able to choose your potion on the fly has opened up so many more PvP situations, primarily and mostly affecting small groups, duos and solos, where all of those decisions really matter. And you cannot just pre-equip and be ready for everything like you can if you have a very clearly defined role in a bigger group, for example. Not recognizing that all those good impacts have already come from the change made about a year ago, recognizing that we do want players to have some more tactical decision in regards to their consumables when also in a fight, I think that we should try to figure out some simple way to replace the current potion juggling by being able to probably pre-equip 3 potions or something along those lines so that you still have some choice for a fight and for the situation, and you can have your Invis Potion ready if the situation arises. And even mobile players can have a button which lets them, I know there's already a lot of buttons if you're playing on a small phone, but some button that lets you choose between those 3 options that you have already pre-selected. Another much clunkier but still somewhat viable option would be to use some potions directly from your inventory. So you would still bring them, but instead of having to, you know, stack them as one and all those things that we do right now, you would be able to click the potion or left click the potion, or whenever you equip it, for example, that essentially counts as consuming. Anyway, I think this mechanical part is the tricky part to figure out, but I am very convinced that in a bigger picture view, going back to restricting players to essentially one potion or changing the equivalent of changing their loadout is not a good step for the PvP at all, and will not only make it less enjoyable, more risky, less enjoyable, and less active, but also will kind of take out a bit of that fun skill gap edge that right now you can get if you get good at this part of the game. Let me know if you agree or you disagree, or what kind of ideas you had. It's possible that there are benefits to this change in this future test, server patch that actually I didn't think about. Maybe there's some things that you really enjoyed from the way Albion PvP was before, and in that case, make sure to let me know. I'm very open to changing some of my opinions here. At the end of the day, Albion Online is a full loot or hardcore full loot MMORPG, which means that it's always trying to strike a balance between being a difficult, competitive, hardcore game, but at the same time also being a social, enjoyable MMO which is accessible to as many people as possible. So this seems like one of those questions of where exactly do you want to strike the balance, and I personally prefer keeping the balance where it is and finding ways to develop the technical aspect of how you could choose potions, but not going back to a slower, more rigid system, which I believe can restrict solo PvP unnecessarily.